Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I hope we are all well tonight. My name is Wanjiro Njenga, and I work here at Womaniko. And I'm here with my colleague, Jabu. Can you give us a wave? There she is. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Thank you on Facebook for joining us. We are live on Facebook right now. So, hi to all the viewers. Before I introduce today's conversation, I want to go over some house rules. The first is to please keep yourself muted and your cameras off throughout the entire evening, unless we state otherwise. So towards the end, during the Q&A session, you can then, raise your hand and then you can unmute yourself. For the second house rule, let's be respectful of each other's differing opinions, even if you do not agree with them. This is a safe space and we do not want anyone to feel harmed in any way. And yes, thirdly, the Q&A is going to be at the end of the session that we have today, where you can ask your questions and make your comments, but also throughout the evening, you can also do that in the chat box. Right. So just to explain what Womaniko Associates is, it is a collaboration between Womaniko Transforming Spaces and the Well Health Company, who have come together to develop a campaign focused on raising awareness of the disproportionate impacts of the pandemic on women. And this campaign was the Dare to See Us campaign. And I will hand over to my colleague, Jabu.
Good evening to everyone. I will be giving us some insight into what the Dare to See Us campaign is and why it is that we're gathered here today as the youth. I do understand that some people have already passed that youth stage, but we appreciate you nonetheless. So the Dare to See Us campaign was launched in October last year, and the objectives of the campaign are twofold. So one, it is to inspire workplaces that see women in the world in the context of COVID-19. And number two, it is to showcase workplace initiatives that see women. The Dare to See Us campaign is built on the foundation of intersectionality. It is a campaign that acknowledges that it is not only South African heterosexual, cisgendered, and abled women that are not seen in the workplace, never mind in the context of COVID-19. The campaign acknowledges that COVID-19 has not only exposed and exacerbated pre-existing biases between women and men, but it takes into account that these biases but it takes into account that the bias and the discrimination experienced by foreign nationals, LGBTQ plus people, and those who are differently abled have also been exacerbated. By using the intersectional approach, we wish to improve the understanding that the sexual division of labor, biological differences, employment patterns, social roles, and social structures all contribute to gender-specific patterns of bias and inequality. The intersections between gender bias and inequality vary based on age, gender, nationality, and sexual orientation. The research that we conducted indicated that LGBTQ plus people are underrepresented in corporate environments. Many have reported being an only in their organizations or on their teams. This can fuel further discrimination and feelings of anxiety, which can often leave some feeling isolated within the workplace. Research also indicates that LGBTQ plus people feel that they have to outperform non-LGBTQ plus colleagues. In March, we as Womaniko Associates conducted a rapid survey. The survey examined women's experiences in the workplace to determine whether the employment sector has moved beyond access to address the treatment or lack thereof that women experience in the workplace. Half the participants were from the 25 to 30 age group, while 26.7% of these participants were in the 18 to 24 age category. And this is predominantly why we want to hear from the youth tonight. 66.7% of the respondents stated that they had experienced a form of gender bias and discrimination, which is quite alarming. What is even more alarming is the fact that only 33% of the respondents did not report that they had experienced a form of gender discrimination and bias. 16.7% were not even sure if they had reported these incidents to the relevant people or channels. This is quite frightening because it cannot and should not be an I'm not sure situation. The answer should have been either a yes or a no. And the most common reasoning behind this uncertainty is that the woman did not feel that it was important to report these incidents. And in the instance where they did report them, nothing was done about their cases. This puts into question buzzwords such as speak up culture and safety. How else can we as the youth speak up when our cries fall on deaf ears? When we are sexualized and shut down by those who are meant to protect us? And it leaves us wondering if speaking up is really worth it, especially in a country where the unemployment rate sits at 32.6%. Is speaking up really worth it when discrimination, abuse, and victimization are deeply embedded in an organization's culture, systems, and workplace norms? I was reflecting this sometime this week, and it dawned on me that many women, young women, find themselves as token hires. So many of us have unknowingly fallen into this trap, and we have later found ourselves in compromising situations that leave us feeling vulnerable and exploited. Some of us young women are being sexually groomed. The only thing that makes the sexual grooming unique is the fact that it is paraded as mentorship. The issues that we are plagued with in the workplace are many, and the time allocated tonight is not even enough to unpack and to address all of these issues. Tonight, we wish to focus on issues such as gender bias and discrimination, tokenism, the misrepresentation or the underrepresentation of LGBTQ plus people in the workplace, sexual grooming that is guised as mentorship, as well as the importance of engaging in activism as the youth. The theme for this year's Youth Month was the year of Charlotte Manya Makleke, growing youth employment for an inclusive and transformed society. And according to the National Youth Development Agency, it reads, all sectors of society must come on board to implement inclusive youth interventions, which will ultimately promote the constitutional rights of all youth, including young women, youth with disabilities, young men, LGBTQ+, and youth in rural areas. And while there is still a lot of work to do in addressing the issues that we face as the youth, I believe that we're doing our part to contribute to the NYDA's call. Part of the Dare2SeeUs campaign is to advocate for workplaces that see LGBTQ+ and differently abled people, young women who are new job entrants, foreign nationals, and essentially everyone. The campaign is about ensuring that we all feel seen and valued within our workplaces. And we have an amazing panel with us tonight who's going to help us unpack some of these issues. The issues are the focus of the night because we come out of Youth Month and Pride Month, and we believe that it is important that we address these issues post Youth Month and Pride Month. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Jabu, for that lovely introduction. Although the stats are very saddening. But before we get into, introducing our diverse and amazing panel, I would like us to go to a Menti question, all right? So Mentimeter is a place where we ask for your, opinions on a certain question. Yes. And this is where we are going to go. So can you please all go to menti.com, so www.menti.com, and use the code 83713283. This code should also be put up on the chat box by my colleague. And the first question is, what do you think are the structural barriers that young people face in the world of work in relation to gender? And so as you come and you answer this question, it will pop up on screen, but it will be anonymous. So we won't know who you are. You are protected, but we also really love to pick your brain as to what do you think are the structural barriers that young people face in the world of work in relation to gender? I hope you guys are typing.
Okay, seems like we have some shy people on the call with us today.
Very shy. Don't worry, guys, it is anonymous, but I really hope you are typing. But just from my side, I know that one of the barriers would be the recruitment process. Just by, what they are asking for the job requirements. It may not be very visible. It could be very subtle things like having to own a car when you are applying for your very first job. And that definitely narrows down the audience that the companies are talking to. There's a certain kind of people that, have their very first car before they started work, or just small issues like that just come up in the recruitment process that exclude a certain group of people from actually trying to apply for it, because you realize, okay, wait, I don't have a job, thus I can't get a car, but if you give me the job I can get a car. And then they sit back and they're like, not really. I know this specific incident happened to one of my cousins, and it was a very sad and confusing statement that they the fact that they didn't want to hire him because he didn't have a car. But in order to get the car, you need your first job, or for example, you need to have so many years of experience if this is your first job. And you can't get it because that's what you're coming to do. You're coming to get your experience from that specific company. But if they don't allow you to, go through that process, then what's the point? Are we still shy?
Okay, no, thank you for that, for sharing that, Wanjura. I'm thinking let's rather move on, and then we could probably just later come back to this Menti question.
Yes. Oh, wait, we do have, yay. Sorry, I just needed to refresh my page. Ageism, yes, definitely. Working hours that require one to be at work early or stay late. That could be a very dangerous issue, especially for young women who will find themselves in vulnerable positions, like going home really late, and it's quite dangerous for you. Work experience, yes. Working in a male-dominated occupation, spaces like construction. There are barriers that refer to certain races and gender versus young people in general. This is basically all that I've spoken about. But yes, these are a lot of barriers, and there are more. Apologies. There are more, but we will now move on to the next Menti question. So all you have to do is refresh the page that you're on. It is still www.menti.com, and you use the code 83713283. And the question is, as a young person or not, what do you look for in a decent workplace? What are the things that are on your must-have list for a decent workplace that you know, okay, I'm going to spend a few years here building my career? I keep forgetting about the mute button. A safe space where I can fully engage. Yes, where you are comfortable, expressing your opinions without feeling that you will be, frowned upon. An environment conducive for growth, inclusion, freedom to be creative, good energy. Yes, the good energy. Workplace culture is a must. It's definitely a must for me. I think going into a space, I need to be able to feel that I will, gel with the culture that they have, and it matches the values and morals that I, look for or go according to. a space where I can learn and make mistakes without being judged. Yes. Remuneration, learning and development, opportunities, psychological safety, and can be and not be judged. Yes. Thank you for all your answers. This is great. This is great. This means that there's a lot of engagement from our audience. Okay. We will then leave this mentee. Thank you so much for engaging with us and answering our questions. They will still be up, so it's not closed. So if you still want to hop over there and continue to answer, that's not a problem. We will then go on to our first speaker. We have Riska Koopman. Apologies. Yes, we have Riska Koopman, who unfortunately could not be here because of personal reasons. But Riska Koopman currently works as an independent NGO consultant focused on issues of gender, economic, and tax justice. Riska is a passionate intersectional feminist activist deeply interested in Africa's growth, development, and role in the world. She currently holds a BA and BCom honors degree from the University of Stellenbosch and has worked with organizations like Oxfam, South Africa, and Publish What You Pay. So because Riska is not here with us, we do have a recording of her inputs to the session.
Discrimination. There are still many gender biases and discrimination in the workplace, and a lot of times it's not as explicit as one would imagine. So, for example, I was changing jobs whilst being pregnant, and in that time, when I was called for final interview, and then also during the contract negotiation stage, I literally was shaking because, I was thinking, do I disclose my pregnancy? What would this mean for me? Would I still be the best candidate for this job? And then also it brings back the question, I'm pregnant. Nothing about me is inhibiting me from doing the job besides being pregnant. And then I asked a few people, and obviously I got different responses from people. You get moral responses, ethical responses, and then I was looking at the legalities of it all. And according to South African law, I do not need to disclose my pregnancy at any stage. Just a month before you decide to go on maternity leave, you need to disclose to your employer. And at that stage, I decided to take the risk, and I say it's a risk because the consequences, even though it's not legal, it can still happen within the workplace. I took the risk of not disclosing my pregnancy because I feared that it might change my circumstance. And I went on to work at this company, but there was definitely some feelings of it wasn't well received, if I can put it in that way. And then also during COVID, once again, obviously by this stage I'd given birth, I had a baby. The fact that I had a baby came into play once again, and my colleagues suddenly became very obsessed with my time and how I was managing, because we are obviously in hard lockdown, how I was managing a child and work and all of these things. And it wasn't in a supportive way, it was more as a tool of criticizing me. So I think these things happen, and it's not always overtly, it's not always directly. As a young women of color in the workplace, we tend to face more barriers in terms of firstly getting into the job market, and then once we are there, fighting tooth and nail to stay there, and also to grow within the workplace. For example, you will come into an organization and there'll be older women, and they would want you to, this has happened to me on numerous occasions, both in the private, public and government sector, where people wanted to be addressed as auntie. And that also then devalues you and the work that you do in the workplace, because yes, I have respect for you as a colleague, but you are not my auntie, you know? And that regenerating of these biases in the workplace, it also inhibits you then from learning and growing. I learned small techniques in the workplace. For example, how to protect my own energy, how to protect my own sanity, and also what my worth is within the workplace, and knowing that I'm very replaceable in the situation. Decent workplace has become an oxymoron in today's world. And it protects us, and I think that, you know, you hear this all the time. South Africa has wonderful laws, they have a wonderful constitution, but for who? You know, it's really not to our advantage most of the time. What a decent workspace would look like, it's definitely a safe environment. And I mean that beyond just physical elements of safety, also having the proper policies in place to enact this safe environment. Looking at things like working late, tips from where your office is located, and also in terms of sexual harassment policy and who and how to enact those policies, because you can't be the person writing and acting and enforcing policies. There needs to be separation of power. And also I find in my sector a lot, you have the finance person is also the HR person, is also this, that and the other. So it becomes a very stressful endeavor to even interact with policy within the workplace. And also when we are looking at salary, a decent workplace should be where you are remunerated adequately, where you're being paid for the work that you put in, where you're being paid for overtime, and also a work that is, for example, with COVID, a work that is understanding, that is flexible, that allows you to work from home if needs be, and if possible, of course, and also opportunities for growth. So, looking at things like training, personal development, capacity development, I think those are tenets of a good, decent work environment. I think that platforms like this also enables you to kind of link up with people who have had similar experiences, and the power of storytelling is also so important, because then you can also hear, you know, this girl went through this and that, and this is what she's done. And also using social media to connect on many of these platforms. And we also have lots of Black women coming out and telling their stories in different ways about the workplace, navigating predominantly white spaces in South Africa or on the continent. The Dare2SeeUs campaign and campaigns like it across Africa, across the global south is extremely important. And as I said, you know, we need, it's also the thing of representation matters. You know, I see somebody on screen who looks like me, who talks like me, who has a story like me. And as I said before, our work experience, our educational, economic, and all of those experiences and interactions with the labor market and the economy is so different from our Indian and white counterparts in South Africa, in the global South, because of the color of our skin, because of this collective history that we have together of oppression. So representation is so important, storytelling is so important, and just at the end of the day, also the feeling of I'm not alone, I am seen, I am valued, even though this capitalist market, this patriarchal system is so much bigger than me. I have comrades, I have my sisters, I have a home within the society. There is a place for me, and especially for me, it's like been my saving grace time and time again, the sisterhood in feminism, the sisterhood in my online communities. When I'm feeling like I'm not going to get this grant, how can I complete this degree? Or I'm juggling motherhood, being a student, being a partner, being a mother, being a sister, all of these things, and I just feel burnt out. And I see so many other women just holding space for me and encouraging me to just rest, or giving me tips or dinner ideas. It comes from the simplest places, and just in that moment to be seen, to be like, I think in that way, this community really does mean a lot. And I also think a lot of times the value of this community and these interchanges and exchanges, which leads to immense personal growth, and it also helps you then to cope and balance and grow within the workplace, is devalued, because the capitalist system says you need to produce, all of your output should be measurable, all of those things. And to find a community that says, no, it's not true, that in of itself is so valuable. So I think there's when young people are saying, you know what, self-care is a priority, mental health is a priority, and chanting those types of mantras, and actually also passing it down to the younger generation, is where we are breaking these intergenerational curses of being burnt out, of choosing between having a family and having a career. So these are very important things, and it shouldn't be seen as, oh, we're putting on a face mask on a Sunday. It's much more than that.
Wow. A special thanks to Riska Koopman, who took the time out to, record her input, and also to Ricky Minuku, who facilitated that conversation. You saw her pop up a little bit. But what I noticed in her input was that she was doing a lot of mental gymnastics when applying for a job and determining whether to disclose her pregnancy. So mental gymnastics is a term mentioned by Lynette Kimadi, who I assume is on this call because she was here in our previous session. And it was basically asking yourself a number of questions at the same time. Your mind is just running wild when you have to make a decision. You're thinking about the consequences of the decision, or any other matter in general, whether you belong in this space because you're a woman, or you're young, or you're just made to feel inadequate. So that's, I think, what I saw with Riska's input. That was coming out so clearly in that. And she's not the only one. I know a lot of us go and sit through thinking of so many questions at the same time of what to do, how can I do this better, do I fit in, do I not fit in? Yeah.
Thank you for that, Wanjiro. I think what mostly came out for me, and we encourage you guys to also share your thoughts in the chat box. But what really came out strong for me was how she was scared to speak up, even though she was well within her right to speak up. You often, as I said, like I referred earlier on to buzzwords such as speak up culture. Are these things just fancy terms that are being thrown around in organizations, or are they actually spaces in organizations where people can actually speak out without the fear of losing their jobs or not even receiving a job? And we can see in Riska's case how that the culture for to speak up really wasn't even there. Yeah, so we want to thank Riska for that submission, and Ricky as well for facilitating that interview. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, very vibrant and young lady, Oamogetswe Chikwado, who is a member of Black Women Caucus and of Black Girls in Caucus, the high school, which is the high school division of Black Women Caucus. She's the founder of #ForTeensOnly, which is an online platform that facilitates peer support for teens which are between the ages of 13 and 19. And she is currently completing her second year in electrical engineering at Tshwane South College. So, Oamogetswe, the floor is yours.
Can you all hear me? Good evening, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Oamogetswe Chikwado. I am a member of Black Women Caucus and a member of Black Girls in Caucus, the high school division of Black Women Caucus. I am also the founder of #ForTeensOnly, an online platform that facilitates peer support for teenagers 13 to 19 years of age. I am currently doing my second year in electrical engineering, and yes, that's it from me. I don't know if I was asked anything else. I'm sorry, my network was just doing the most to me.
It's not a worry. You can continue with your input.
All right, so I don't know. Do I follow the questions or do I just speak on a random?
You can follow the questions.
Okay. So as we had a meeting, actually, let me start there. With the two beautiful ladies sharing the sessions, and we spoke about the work that we both do and what we think the solutions are and whatnot. And I think it took me a couple of days actually to prepare myself, because I was like, "Yo, guys, what am I going to speak about?" It's very important to speak about issues that you've experienced, right, so that you can relate to them, as opposed to just speaking in general, right? And so I was like, okay, let me center this presentation about how I'm feeling, what I'm going through, and what I think the possible solutions are, right? Because I believe my story relates to a lot of young women, and they are not able to, speak up like I am, or are not confident enough, or actually fear because of whatever setbacks they might have. And so I just like to share a couple of things I prepared for today. And so I just like to start with saying that women who have just graduated and are still also to graduate face challenges of sexual harassment because they are unable to get jobs and end up having to sleep with our bosses for employment, of course. And then being in a male-dominated industry as a young woman and having to always get bullied and belittled by other men because they say, I am a woman and I cannot be an engineer, I mean, often young Black women are always discriminated because they are firstly in a male-dominated industry, and men feel like they're challenging them, right? And so when I am studying electrical engineer and I'm in a class full of men, and they're just like, why are you here? Don't you have something else to study, because you do not look like an engineer? And then I ask myself, do I have to be masculine to be an engineer? Do I have to speak like an engineer? Do I have to look like an engineer? I don't know how engineers look. Maybe they have a look, and maybe I'm just that one person who just does not look like an engineer, right? And so as long as these issues are still pressing, I think feminist activism is still going to be with us for a very long time, because, I mean, if we don't fight for ourselves, these men are clearly not going to do it for ourselves. These men are living their own life, right? And so this is why many young women have been pushing for stronger sexual harassment policies at work, because it also influences young women, because they find themselves being sexually harassed every time they are in the workplace. And so by creating safer workplace for women, I mean, many of us would be confident enough then to, penetrate the system without even being afraid of, what is this man going to say? What are these men going to say, And so, I mean, whenever I speak to the young women in hashtag for teens only, you come across answers like, I want to graduate, I want to finish school, but I'm afraid of being a victim of sexual harassment, because many a times I'm going to have to give myself over to the boss in order for me to be employed. I'd rather not work than having to stoop so low, rather, to giving myself over to a man for a job. And so, unfortunately, many of these young women cannot refuse because they are desperate and they end up being victims of sexual harassment. I mean, also they cannot say anything because they have no other choice but to be victims of sexual harassment. And now this brings the question to say, do they enjoy being sexually harassed, or is it because they generally do not have a choice but to just succumb to the situation they are faced? And so, yeah, I think that's my input for this evening. Thank you.
Before you go, Oamogetswe, thank you so much for that. I also wanted to ask you about the importance of young people engaging in activism, young women especially.
Yeah, I think we are all activists, right? I don't think people are publicly saying they are activists, but I think it's little things we do, as young people. The challenges we create on TikTok, use social media as a way of expressing ourselves, right? And we don't openly say that I'm an activist and I'm advocating for body shaming, whatever the case may be. So I think it's very important for young people to sort of do I say initiate themselves, but to sort of be more involved, right, in activism, because I think that's the place we can unpack a lot of issues that we are facing as a collective, because we face different issues, but the same, but differently. I don't know if I'm making sense, right? So we are saving, well, when I say we're facing the same issues, I mean, we are all going through the same thing, but we just don't know what to call it because we're not talking about it, right? And so it's very important that once we start to identify what the problem is and, identify the causes of this problem, then we are able to, come with solutions to the problems that we have discussed about as young people. And so it's very important for us to join our heads, get to join movements, that seek to ensure the safety of women and children, and see where we can take things from here,
Thank you so much. Excuse me, Oamogetswe. That was very insightful. I think for the point I got about the activism, I know for current and younger generations, social media has been like the main method of activism, whether to call people physically out onto the streets or whether to play their part in their own countries or at home, especially during the pandemic. Someone is able to participate anywhere they are all over the world. For example, movements like the Black Lives Matter, the total shutdown, the Me Too movement, fees must fall. And what we're seeing in most of these movements or protests is that they're started by young people, young women especially. For example, Zuleika Patel, who fought against the policing of Black hair, or Oluwatoyin Salau, who was a leader in her community for the Black Lives Matter in America, who unfortunately has since passed. But we have so many examples of young people, young women who are in the forefront of these protests, who are protesting for their rights. And you are right. It just means that we all need to like put our heads together, to join hands, to band together, because as soon as one person stands, another person sees that that person is standing and they're like, but I also want to fight for this. So they will stand, and many more people will stand for this, for the different causes and the different initiatives. And so, yes, that's amazing. We just definitely need to put our hands together, our heads together to fight together for the things that we know are right and should be already in our spaces. Thank you so much, Oamogetswe, for your input.
Thank you so.
Yes, and now I will hand over to Jabu.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Oamogetswe. I really like the point that you made about joining together. And I think social media allows us to do that without fear of being victimized, even though it does happen, but social media does allow us to rally together behind a common cause. In a session that we had at the beginning of the year, one of our panelists said that we need to not create echo chambers. And I think social media allows us to not do that, to not speak amongst ourselves. So thank you so much for that. The next speaker, I would characterize her as a mover and a shaker. Our next speaker is Elma Akob. She is from Cameroon, and she is currently pursuing her master's in strategic business management. Elma is an advocate for women empowerment, and she is a Pan-African citizen. She is a business owner and the founder of Elevate Africa, which is a global award-winning keynote speaker, conference MC, and a voiceover artist whose voice has been used by the likes of Netflix, Disney, and DSTV, as well as the Gautrain. So that's very nice voice you guys hear when you go onto the Gautrain. That's Elma's voice. So Elma, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jabu, for the opportunity, as well as the whole team from Umaniko. Thank you everyone who's tuned in today, as well as the speakers that I am so honored to be speaking alongside. We've got some really great concepts and some really great minds. And like I said, I'm humbled to be surrounded by this. So let me jump straight into it. Now, when we speak about tokenism, I have not only experienced it, but I've seen tokenism happen in a lot of conversations, especially recently. Now more than ever, we are seeing underrepresented people shine. And that concept just doesn't sit well with some people. The idea that you can have a young Black woman being a CEO of a company is something that you've never even contemplated. And so because of that, people like to find a justification, a loophole. Why is this person in this position? It must have something to do with the fact that they are a woman, or it must have something to do with the fact that they're Black, and the company is just trying to, have some sort of representation to get BEE status, or just to be recognized internationally that we have a female CEO. And it's a real problem because we have qualified people who are working their butts off to get into these positions, only to be questioned and to be brought and to have their positions reduced to just a form of tokenism. So I think it's a really big problem in society, and it's something that we need to work on. It has to deal with implicit bias, as well as the bias that are being reflected on by others, and we need to start calling out that bias. Once you see someone saying, why is that person a CEO? Because, are they even qualified? Should they even be there? It happens with young people a lot as well. No one believes that young people can be leading these large organizations, and it's happening. So people better get ready for it. Now, how is the world of work changing? Before we even look at how the world of work is changing, we need to evaluate how the education system needs to change. So I've heard of a lot of people joke about the fact that after 12 years of schooling, I know what a parallelogram is. I know how to identify X. I even know what makes up the whole periodic table off by heart, but I don't know how to pay my taxes. And it sounds funny, but that's the truth. And it's a very scary truth that we have 20th century teachers educating 21st century students using a 19th century curriculum. So the education system needs to change right from the onset, because if the world is changing and education is not changing with it, we're going to be left behind with what else is happening in the world. So I don't believe schools and universities are fully equipping the youth of the 21st century for the future that lies before them. But this being said, I must say, I celebrate the resilience and creativity of the youth, the freelancers, the influencers, those who have built themselves up from scratch, teaching themselves how to code, teaching themselves how to trade. This generation of young people are really putting themselves out there. And I must say that I congratulate them for doing so. So yes, the world of work is changing, and it requires one to be change receptive, change agents. And there's so much pressure to keep up with the times. For example, I've seen companies completely change their branding, their workplace norms, even the space of companies. Like normally in the past, you would walk into a company and you would see a desk and a chair. Now, a lot of people are adopting the Google idea of companies where there is not just chairs, there's bean bags, there's lots of colors, there's a creative space, there's a games room to allow people to be able to show off their creativity in this 21st century. I mean, even before we jumped onto this call, one of the organizers who was talking to us had, her kids running around. That's the new world of work. That's the world of work that we are looking forward to. The fact that I can work from home and I'm still doing the work that you've required me to do, even if it means my kids are running around, because that's just the environment that I'm in. And that's hard for a lot of people to accept, but it's what they're going to have to accept because it's changing. And if you don't change with it, you're going to be left behind. Now, what do young people look for in a decent workplace? The biggest answer for that for me personally is trust. There's a mentality that young people are bound to fail. They're bound to make mistakes because they're careless and they don't adequately perform tasks. And so when you already have this preconceived notion that I will fail, everything I do will come across as failure because you're not even giving me the opportunity to make a right decision or to succeed in the job that you have hired me to do. So I always say that young people want to be trusted. Trust me to complete the task, even if I'm going about it in an unconventional way. Trust me to do the job because you saw my CV, you employed me, so I am qualified. So trust me to do what you've employed me to do. Young people want to be taken seriously. For example, I have a dream of being a news anchor on BBC or CNN or any of the, news. I'm not discriminating because that's what I'm passionate about. But there is this mentality that comes with the idea that young people are not aware of what's going on in the world and can't report on news. So every single time I have applied for these positions, as soon as they look at the CV and they see 21, they're like, what's a 21-year-old going to tell me about world politics? What's a 21-year-old going to tell us about what's happening in Gaza and things like that? And so we want to be taken seriously because we really do know what we're talking about when we are intentional. We want to be able to showcase our creativity and treat it with respect. I remember a friend of mine got a promotion in her business, which is majority made up of people older than her. And she was placed in this awkward position of having to tell Umama no Baba, like your uncle or auntie, people who are older than you, calling them out when they're wrong, because God forbid that you have a younger person tell you that you're out of order or that you haven't completed your task on time. It's something that a lot of people are struggling to accept. But like I've said before, they're going to have to accept it because change is coming. In fact, change has already come. And if you're not willing to change with the change, then you will be left behind. Now, lastly, before I close off, my company, Elevate Africa, which focuses on training voiceover artists as well as public speakers, because we believe that public speaking is a skill that is needed by every single individual, whether you are a teacher, whether you're an accountant, or whether you want to be a change agent who is speaking and impacting lives of others. Like the previous speaker said, being an activist, because we're all activists. To be an activist, not only is what you say important, but how you say it. That's what leaves people feeling, a sense of belonging in what you're saying. So what we managed to do to reimagine the world of work is we first of all launched our business in the middle of COVID-19, which was hard on its own because, as we know, COVID-19 has just been so detrimental to the industry and the world of work. And so launching a business in the middle of a pandemic was already a big step for us because we felt that these skills were needed with or without a pandemic. Then we've decided to obviously implement virtual classes, which is something that everyone has had to do, including even universities and the education system. So we're training public speakers from all over the world. We have students in America, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Germany, joining in on these public speaking lessons because they want to learn and learning virtually. And also we teach self-sustainability, the idea to be your own boss because the world of work has changed. And there's power in your own voice. So we like to teach young people how to become self-sufficient entrepreneurs who are putting their voices out there as a voiceover artist, for example, for companies to work with me directly. And if I have not run out of time, I haven't checked my messages. Do I have 2 minutes? I haven't. Okay, cool. And then this is now the final thing where I think it's really important. What role can young people play in the Dare to See Us campaign? The fact that we are having this conversation, and as you can see, the speaker, myself, as well as the two people who are interviewing are all young Black women, it shows you that something is happening in society, because 10 years ago, this was not a possibility. This was something that was not even possible, because I used to join panel discussions and it was so rare for me to find myself or someone who looked like me being represented. So we're already taking a step in the right direction. Now, since COVID-19, it is estimated that 47 million girls and women have been pushed into extreme poverty. Most women work in the informal sector, and thus in the first month of the pandemic, they were out of jobs already. Schools were closed, and so we saw a rise in child marriages taking place. We saw more gender-based violence. We saw more rape, more depression, and more death. And the Dare to See Us campaign provides a platform for conversation, but also for impact. As young people, we ought to be cognizant about what is going on around us. Awareness alone can remove the shackles of a prisoner. Just being aware of what is going on, being aware that, whatever you say to someone, what implications it could have on them, just the conversations that we are having. I've always said awareness, I know it's a biblical thing, but it says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. The lack of knowledge, literally not being aware of what is going on in your surroundings, will keep you jailed mentally. And so this generation of young people are made up of activists. We are vocal, we are loud, we are proud, and we can never let that die. We need to keep talking. We need to keep holding organizations, institutions, people in positions of leadership accountable. We need to keep making noise, and we need to keep making our voices heard. Thank you.
Wow. Just wow. There's so many points that I can come from. Okay, firstly, with regards to the tokenism, one of our professors who helped us with, bringing together the report that we did, Prof. Zetu Kakata, she mentioned that it should be borne in mind that the very idea of what is considered formal employment was designed by and for men. Women entered the workplace as a support system to men. And then that just means that you come in with a token hire, You
Exactly.
just have a quota to fill. And that's where, young people and young women come in, women in general. And you're taken just because of your gender, your race, your ethnicity, anything like that, instead of the skill that you have. So they disregard your CV entirely, and they just look at you at face value. And going back to what you said about the creative spaces allow a healthy workspace culture, which basically enables women to be authentically themselves. And that is what Womaniko wants. We want women to be authentically themselves in the workspace, because that means that they can work up to their full potential. Isn't that what people want? We want our companies to thrive. And in order for companies to thrive, their workmanship, or the people who are working for them, need to be at their full potential. And so the culture of the company needs to be a healthy and a welcoming culture.
Exactly.
And now
you need to like what you do.
Yes, definitely. And with the world of work changing, working from home and freelancing, you might end up being more productive at home than you were in the office space that you started with. And so they need to start allowing people to, I think, not just work from home because of the pandemic, but work from home because you are more productive from home. And just, the statement that you made of be your own boss, there's power in your own voice. That comes from being authentically yourself. If you're in a space that you feel that you can be yourself 100%, your voice will definitely shine through in anything that you do, and your potential will be at its 100. So thank you so much, Elma, for your contribution. Wow, that was amazing. Oh, wow, I'm just like in awe of all of our speakers.
Yeah, no, we've got amazing speakers tonight. The point that I really want to touch on is how educational systems need to change. A few weeks back, someone was joking about how they had to learn the parts of a grasshopper, the body parts of a grasshopper, and to this very day they've not used that knowledge. And what hits home for me is how these educational systems don't give us any life skills. You go into the workplace with with book knowledge that can only help you to a certain degree. You get into these companies, and they prey on you because of your age and your lack of knowledge, and you don't even know what to do. And I think, again, that's such a silencing thing for, I guess, a young Black woman. You know, you don't know what to do, who to turn to. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Alma. Wandro is going to introduce our last speaker for the evening.
Yes, we have come to our fourth and final speaker, but not least, Jamil Khan, who is a critical diversity scholar, columnist, and author. He's currently enrolled for a PhD in critical diversity studies at Wits Center for Diversity Studies. His work explores multiple axes of difference, including race, gender, sexuality, and class. His critical diversity training has equipped him with theoretical and practical tools to analyze how power operates in society to marginalize certain bodies for the benefit of others. And now I'll stop share and open the floor to Jamil.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to this conversation. The contributions thus far have been nothing short of phenomenal. I think for me, what I'd like to bring to the conversation are a couple of reflections on, or to draw a couple of parallels and create a few links between the world of work and the history of the world, as it were. When we think about, work, the concept of labor, not only in South Africa, but in many parts of the world, there's a reason why some of us joke today and we talk about the workplace as the plantation, because the very system on which this idea of work operates, which is a capitalist system, right, was born out of the extraction of exploiting the labor of Black people and people of color around the world. And of course, being Black and a person of color intersects with other kinds of positionalities, like being a woman, like being a queer person, like being disabled. Those are all ways in which those intersectional realities come together to form a particular experience. And for the most part, the world of work, as we've known it up until now, and I think it's important to state that, because as we've heard from our previous speakers, it cannot be taken for granted that that is what it is and what it will remain. The world of work, the environments that have been created in workplaces are very much a reflection of the world that we live in. And so, I mean, these are points that have been made in different ways before. But we talk about something like professionalism, right? The idea of how to conduct yourself in a workplace. And I think for most of us attending this event and on this panel, we'd very easily be able to say that in some way or another, the idea of professionalism has always been antithetical to who we are, our cultures, our social behaviors, how we show up in the world. Because as the point that was made by Alma earlier was, the world of work was designed for a particular person. And that idea of how to act and conduct yourself in the workplace serves to mimic the personality, the character, the behavior of that particular person, which historically has been mostly the cis heterosexual, able-bodied white man. And so now you come into an environment whereby the entire tone of a place, as an example, is something completely masculine. Everything is about being aggressive. Everything is about going hard. Everything is about, knocking things down and fighting for this. Everything. It's almost the language almost creates sort of like war zone imagery. Yeah, and so in that way, again, you exclude a whole lot of people who just are not, are not socialized like that, and also refuse to be. For what reason must one be fighting things? Must one be breaking things? Must one be knocking things down? And so you come in, for example, as a gender diverse person, and now this idea of a professional way of being filters into a dress code. So for me, for example, right, I identify as a non-binary person, but on legal documents, I would be noted as male, right? So now, when I walk into workplace, am I breaking the dress code when I walk in a dress? Is that unprofessional of me to wear something that's comfortable for me? Am I going against some kind of code of conduct? So now we get punished. We get punished for simply showing up as is comfortable for us, right? And so that's not exclusive to the world of work. Again, there's a parallel, right? Because when I walk out of my home like that, there are also consequences for me to show up looking one way when I'm expected to act another way. And then, of course, this also then filters into how my work is viewed. So so now it becomes humorous, right? And for that reason, I'm not to be taken seriously, and my contributions are not to be taken seriously. There's also this, so I want to circle back to the point that I made about exploitation, right? And this is especially something that's prevalent with the relationship that young people have with the world of work. And I'm going to share a personal anecdote. I remember many years ago, I think I was about 24 or 23, one of my first jobs, and I think, I can't remember why, but for some reason I decided that I'm just going to finish a lot of things that I needed to have finished, because it was just a personal goal of mine that I had set. And I think it was already around 8 p.m. And I was just about packing up to leave. And by that time, all my managers and superiors had, even that language, right, that you call people who have a different job description to you a superior is problematic. But I decided to stay late, but it had nothing to do with anybody else. And I was just about to pack up and leave, and one of the big bosses in the company came by, and they were still there, and said to me, "Oh, you're packing up, leaving so early." And I looked at him in like bewilderment, thinking, it's 8 p.m. What do you mean leaving so early? But anyway, I just brushed it off and said, no, I think I've done enough for the day. And he laughed, and it was framed as a joke. He laughed and he said, "Oh, no, but don't worry about it. If you need, we can set up a mattress for you in the back and you can sleep there." And this just made me realize the thinking behind what it means to be a good employee. And what that means often is that you forsake every and any form of self-preservation for the benefit of this entity, this work entity. And that brings me back to the idea of, that in itself is a reference to slavery, is really what it is. And many workplaces today still operate on that premise, so it's, in terms of I've spoken about gender, spoken about race in many ways, but these things cannot be separated from each other. And I think about, that being sort of an awakening for me, an awakening in the sense that I don't think that I would be able to find any kind of comfort in any work environment when this is the model on which it is built, And so when we talk about what young people look for in a workplace, I think a lot of the time workplaces require people to to assume an identity of being a worker instead of being a whole person, right? So I am a scholar, or a cashier, or I am an accountant, whatever it may be. And so I walk into a workplace with a particular goal and a particular job description that I have to fulfill. But the expectation that I am to abandon all other forms of being while I'm in this workplace, and at all times only be the accountant that I was hired to be, right? But the point is, I'm also a sibling, and sometimes my sibling calls me from home with some other emergency, and I'm the only person that can help them. My job is now in jeopardy because I want to help my sibling, or I'm a parent and something happens, and I am now sort of displaying a lack of professionalism for the fact that I want to also attend to those things. And that's what's happening now in this environment that we are creating, whereby we are working from home. And the response to that now is, somebody mentioned, I think it was Riska that mentioned it, the idea of now wanting such deep, heavy control over people's time, to check that every last minute of the day that they are supposedly paid for is accounted for. The other thing about young people is the realization that sometimes what takes you 4 hours to do takes me 2 hours, because we are different. Whatever the reason may be for that is inconsequential. The point is, have I done the job? Have I, made the deliverable? And workplaces have a very, very tough time relinquishing this kind of control over people's time, and understanding people as individuals who have different ways of doing things. That's the other thing about workplaces. People are being funneled into this narrow framework of what it means to be, like I say, a good worker or a professional worker. And so this idea of presenteeism comes in, right? Where workplaces have for many years been very content with spending resources to no end on people for the simple fact of seeing them in the workplace. I see you at your desk. I see you on your computer. I see you, on the phone, whatever you are doing. So now people are being paid to be seen. Whereas I finished what you needed me to do 2 hours ago. I'm just sitting here so that you can be placated by the fact that I'm in the workplace, and now suddenly the cost to company is justified. So I think what it comes down to for me is all these terms that I've used now, professionalism and cost to company and this and that. All of these things do not take into consideration that people are whole human beings with needs, that if we have an agreement whereby I have agreed to give you X amount of time to enjoy, to extract the benefit of my labor, is it so much to ask them that you as a employer also allow me to show up in my fullness as a person? That sometimes it's not, you don't have to fill out a form to justify the fact that you're not feeling the same today as you were yesterday. That some days are better than others, that you're doing your best and working towards a goal does not look the way it looked yesterday, or won't look the way it looks tomorrow. And that the point really is number one, obviously, is the work being done. That's important. I understand that. But also, are people as employees, are they being recognized as whole human beings who are having all their needs fulfilled? So I think transformation potential of young people in the workplace is, and I've seen a lot of people, first of all, not walking down traditional paths. I mean, I think for my generation, a lot of us, were cautioned against taking unconventional career paths because they are insecure and dangerous, and what happens if it doesn't work out, kind of things. I think a lot of young people are just doing it, doing it and going ahead and saying, if I try, surely I will find a way to make this work, kind of thing. And we know that we live in a country whereby the entity that is supposed to be in charge of making sure that there are opportunities is just not doing its job. And so people taking the initiative to go ahead and say, even just capitalizing on the energy and the enthusiasm that comes with youth, is something that people have found a way to turn into opportunity. And I think it's an important approach to the idea of work, and then also just putting up your hand and saying, no, I'm not willing to do that. I am not willing to allow myself to be exploited. I am not willing to put myself last for a job. So there are so many things that young people are doing that really are doing and would like to do. That's really amazing. And I think, the Dare2SeeUs campaign is also about creating enabling environments for young people to execute these approaches, to try different things without the fear that failure would be the absolute end of the world. So I think creating enabling environments that do not lead with fear, but lead with enthusiasm and hope, is an important place to move from when it comes to employment. The fact that nobody had prepared for the fact that we were going to be faced with this pandemic, and that the way that we work would have to change. However, young people being so, I hate the word resilient, but I'm going to use it in this context. Being resilient and so adaptable is something I think that has been really, really important, and also showed the weaknesses of the systems that we've been using up until now. Because these systems were not prepared, they are not adaptable, and they are not resilient. You miss one tick box on a form, or you don't submit this thing on time, and the entire system goes into crisis mode. Whereas nowadays, there's a saying that gets used on social media a lot, which is usually used in relation to like emotional progress, but this idea of we move. Young people are moving because, something happens, something breaks down, you find a solution and you move on. And it's not a case of nobody needs to be punished for it, nobody needs to be penalized for it. We find solutions. And I think the Dare2SeeUs campaign is one such solution, but then within that also creating the environment to discuss those solutions and actually execute them without the reliance on this idea of a formal structure that was never designed to accommodate people in all their, difference and diversity. Thank you.
I am beyond speechless. Firstly, your experience is so, I was so taken aback. I was like, is this what they're asking you to do? Just to get a mattress and sleep on the floor. It's like I got the breath knocked out of me, and I just couldn't believe that another human being would say this to some other human being. Like, can you not see that I'm a living being? For you to say such a thing to me. There was so many notes I wrote about about this. But firstly, there was an article I had read by Quaylen Illingrid and company, and they reported that employees who are part of the LGBTQ plus community disproportionately fear losing work and feel isolated. They reported more work-related challenges than their straight cisgender peers, which included a workload increase. And this study was done across 11 countries. So they really did their homework, and to see that this is a problem in probably all of the countries all over the world is just so heartbreaking. That you have to put in extra work just because I'm part of the LGBTQ community. That doesn't make sense. Just because I'm a woman, I now need to almost like prove myself to you that I'm putting in more work, but I've already done the work that I've required to do on the job description that I was given. This is what I'm being paid for. If you want me to do more work, then you need to pay me more. And most of these leaders or organizations just can't fathom that fact. They just sit there and they're like, maybe not. And your notes that you made about forsaking yourself just for the preservation of the organization. I can't just leave half of my identity at the door when I walk into work and now, pick it up, like, sit in a desk like a robot and then pick it up when I go home. And that's something I think Lou, one of the speakers in our previous session, had said. You need to take me for all of me. I am Black, I am young, I am a woman, I am, part Kenyan, like anything, that you are. You need to look at this person as a being, as a person with a soul, and not just a robot that can work throughout the night. The issue of blurred boundaries also came into this, especially also with Riska's input, in that, especially during COVID, the managers, the superiors, quote unquote, think that because you're home, you have more time to do work. And they forget entirely that you have a life outside of work. You are a parent, you are a sibling, you are a spouse. You're just a person who wants to sit and relax after a long days of work. And the fact that they're not taking into consideration that a lot of these issues that have shown up at work have been exacerbated, have been like worsened due to the pandemic, because now you're at home, they think you've got more time, and going back to how the workplaces are changing, and that young people like myself don't want to work a 9 to 5. I don't see myself doing this forever. I want to be able to, especially if we're home, I'm going to do the work and I'll finish the work now. And for the rest of the time, I could be doing other things. If I have a side hustle on the side that I want to, bring up, I'm going to use that time for my own personal gain. Like you said, if I can do the work in 2 hours, why should I sit and parade and be bored? Whereas if I was at work and unable to do my own things because you can't use the work internet for your own personal issues or whatever, then I'd get punished for it. So when I'm home, I'm going to be able to do the things that I want to do. What if this job I have is not the end all that I want? Like, I have another career in mind, so I'm going to use that other time to better myself. And I also think that all organizations just should release the idea that they have control over people. A person is not meant to be controlled. We have our own free will. We know when right is wrong. How much time personally I should be taking on this work, whether it's good for my mental health or not. And that just goes with, not walking down the traditional paths, as you said. And yes, as young people, we do move. When you said that, I was so excited. I was like, yes, we move. When we are in the absolute gutters and we cannot get out of it, but you somehow seem to find yourself getting up and you're like, listen, we move. The world is not going to stop spinning because we are here. But yes, take time to take care of your mental health And also organizations need to understand that there needs to be a time to take care of your mental health. And that it's not going to be found in this formal structure that you have made that was specifically made for men, or white men who are elderly or anything like that. We are now people, we're so diverse. In a country like ours, we really should be showing up as our true authentic selves at work in a very creative space that allows us to show our cultural side, our identities fully. But thank you so much, Jamil, for your input. It was amazing. And yes, okay, we will now go on to our Mentimeter question. We have one more Mentimeter question that we want all of you to answer. And the question is, what do you think is the transformational potential of young people in the world of work? So this question was asked to our panelists, and now we're asking it to you, the audience. You can please go to www.menti.com and use the code 83713283. What do you think is the transformational potential of young people in the world of work? Jabu, I don't know if you had any comments to make after that input from Jamil.
I had quite a few, but you literally spoke on my behalf. So I would literally just only be repeating what you said. But thank you very much for that, Jamil. Listen, we move. And I think that it's important that we get that message out, that we're not going to stick around and be unhappy all in the name of making someone money at our expense. So thank you so much for that. And let's just see what pops up on the Menti. Please, if you have any questions for our panelists, do drop them in the chat box. And if you're on Facebook, you can send a message. We will, you can send a message or comment, and we will respond to everyone's questions. All right, so someone has responded, disrupting the very notion of work. Okay. Just gonna wait for more responses. Okay, I think if you can refresh one draw, maybe the other ones will pop up. The benefit of youth is the ability to be flexible and have the energy to try something new and different. I actually really agree with that. I agree with that. Flexibility is everything to me, really, and I do like trying new things. So being in an organization that allows me to be authentic, to be free and crazy in my ideas, that just really does make me happy. I believe that we all need to be embraced for our differences. Okay, it looks like those are all the answers that we got on the Menti. The Menti is not closed, so if you do feel as if you want to respond at a later stage, then that too is okay. We will share, during the course of the week, we will share the responses to these questions on our social media pages. Okay, and now for my favorite part of the evening, the Q&A session. So this is just the opportunity where anyone can ask a question. You can either put it in the chat box if you are shy, and if you're not shy, you can just raise your hand and we will give you the platform. And then it's also the opportunity for the panelists to ask one another any questions that they may have. If not, then Andrea and I will just get into it.
And yes, if you'd like to raise your hand, at the bottom of your screen, you should see something that says reactions. And you can raise your hand at the top, and then we will find you and allow you to unmute yourself and to ask the panelists questions. But if, like Jabu said, you are shy, you are able to ask it in the chat box. And this is also an opportunity for any of the panelists to make more comments on what another panelist has said, to draw conclusions from that. This is a very open space.
Okay, Elma, you can unmute yourself.
I saw, before Alma, I saw Lynette pop up.
Oh,
on
okay.
screen.
All right.
Yeah.
I just saw Elma. Okay, so it goes Lynette, then Elma.
Lynette, are you there? We can't hear you. All right. Okay, that's okay, Lynette. We will hand over to Alma first, and then hopefully at the end of Alma's input, your technical difficulties will be sorted.
Thanks for that, Lolo. Just to encourage people to speak. Usually they speak more when someone else has spoken. So just a quick one. I remember you making a comment that the world of work was built for men. And I just wanted to add on to that, that recently there was an article that was done that even here, just right here at the University of Pretoria, again, obviously not intended. At these times, yes, there was a gender bias, but it was a gender norm. So the whole engineering building, they said, only had male bathrooms. And the one female bathroom was in the building next to the engineering building. So they recently had to restructure the whole engineering building to make space for female bathrooms. I mean, something as natural as going to the bathroom was not even taken into account because at the time there were no female engineers. And so that's just, I mean, and it's only being looked at very recently. And that's just an example of how the world of work was so backwards and how it is only starting to change right now and how it still has a long way to go. It's just a quick comment.
Thank you for that, Alma. It's a little crazy to think that the University of Pretoria didn't have any bathrooms in the engineering building. And let me tell you, that engineering building, the state of the art, it has waterfalls and newly put in tiles and everything. So to think that they didn't have bathrooms for women is crazy. But also, I think on the note of the university, I also want to commend them on the fact that they now have genderless bathrooms in some of the buildings to accommodate non-binary persons. Lynette, were you able to fix your issues? If you are finding that you're unable to talk, then you can just put your statement or question in the chat box.
Okay, it seems we've lost Lynette. There she is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lynette, you are welcome to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, now we can.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank God. First of all, thank you to all the speakers for their contributions. I really enjoyed hearing your perspectives. I think just a general question to all of the panelists, because as a kind of resonated with that idea of the being seen issue, having to show your productivity to earn your money or your salary or what you're being paid to do, and having to be seen doing that work. But also, I think maybe I want to ask the panelists to discuss a little bit more on some of the solutions that are possible in terms of the way the workplace, or the way we can transition to a more healthy workplace. I saw something about wellness in the workplace as well, and what we can do like on a daily basis that allows us to do that. Because sometimes it feels like you can't fight against the culture. You know, it's somebody paying your salary. You don't know if you should speak out, what kind of effect it might have on your, your livelihood. So some of the practical things that we can do to make choices that empower us in the context of the workplace, because it's changing, but it's not there yet, so yeah.
Could I respond? You know, the workplace environment and the relationship between employer and employee is often so extremely lopsided. The mere fact that the concern is this person is paying my salary. First of all, they're not paying a salary. They are administering and managing funds that are allocated to your salary. But at the same time, it's a mutual exchange. You are not being done a favor. This is not philanthropy, So I think we really need to think about how we got to this place whereby you are so afraid of mentioning what it is that you need in an environment whereby it's an exchange. You give me a salary, and in exchange for that, you have the benefit of my skills. We tend to forget that that's what we are doing when we do work, and a company cannot survive without its human resources, as they call it. And so for that reason, you are an extremely important part of the organization. So, I mean, that's just a point I wanted to make about the way in which we approach these things and the language that we use around it. But at the same time, I think a big part of company culture, and this comes in as well with like things like sharing salary, like sharing information about your salary amongst each other. What is being done, and again, I want to bring this back to, because this is just how I work in the world and the work I do, but I want to bring it back to understanding the kinds of rules and expectations that were placed on enslaved communities, right? And how that has filtered through every almost social structure that we know today, in that, enslaved people were not allowed to gather in groups of more than, I don't know, 2 or something to that effect. That we saw filter through into apartheid, whereby Black people were not allowed to gather. Then you move into workplaces whereby people are not allowed to discuss their salaries amongst each other. So the way in which the realities that people are facing collectively are the communication of those realities amongst each other is almost sort of outlawed, so as to keep people as singular individuals that can be more easily controlled, right? So I think in these workplaces, a big part of it is forming community. And I know, you don't necessarily want to be your colleague's friend. Everybody is not compatible as friends. But within the workplace, I think there needs to be a bit more working towards solidarity, working towards community as colleagues. And so when these experiences come up amongst each other, then there's more power in terms of taking a collective grievance to an employer and demanding that kind of accountability, whereas doing it individually is a much more difficult thing. And I think that's something that, in terms of workplace structure, the expectation that people won't do that needs to be eradicated. You cannot expect to employ a group of people and keep them keep fences up between them. So, I mean, there's just one thought that comes to mind. I'm sure the other panelists have other ideas.
If I may just add on to what Jamil has said, and I must say, you've really encompassed everything that needs to be said. And as you were talking, I was just, the little click feature, I was just like, that's so important. We really are raised to not talk about each other's salaries, because I have no idea what the person who's working alongside me is earning. I have no idea what the person below me and above me are earning. And chances are you could have someone who is working at a position that is organizational structure below yours, and they're earning more and you have no idea. And so it's really important that we actually disclose these details. Also, what I wanted to say is, Lynette, I identify with you 100%. We have constantly, as Black women especially, we have to prove ourselves. We have to do 150% more than what is required in our job description, because we just want to not only stand out, but be seen as productive. Because if you do what is required of you, it's going to be seen as not productive enough. So we always feel like we need to do more, go over, beyond, stay for longer hours, do what you're not asked to do, put your hand up whenever there's work to do. And I think, like Jamil was saying, a conversation needs to be had. At the end of the day, when an employment contract is signed, it is a contract between two people. It's not just a contract that is telling you what your duties are, but it is a contract that is telling your employer what their responsibilities are. And if we are not holding them accountable to these responsibilities, then who is? So that conversation needs to be had, where you are either speaking to whoever is, the supervisor or the manager, and letting them know that, listen, here's what my job description says. Here's what I'm doing. There's a disparity between the two of them. I'm doing too much. And, the fact that this is what you are requiring of me means that you're going against the contract that we entered. And, businesses like to threaten us with this idea of you can be replaced. But when there's a legal contract in place, there are legal bodies that will back you up. The support is there that will back you up and say that, according to this contract, you have not broken anything in this contract. There's no reason for you to be let go or for you to be fired or whatever the thing is. So this constant threat that looms over us, the legalities of a contract are on our side. So never feel like you are alone. There are organizations out there, the employment, I can't remember the exact act, but that's there as well. And there are, there's support out there. So don't feel like you are taking on this manager on your own, or you're taking on this organization on your own, because the contract is there to back you up. CCMA, that's the one. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate the input. And I had put in the chat, I agree with the idea of forming community, but I see that shameful monster of a typo over there. So yeah, thanks.
So we have a question that was posted on the events page by Laika, and it reads, so are there any solutions from the panel on how to build conversation between youth and the older generation in the workplace? When the older generation are the people most likely to be in management positions, coming to agreements with them becomes essential when trying to push for the change that the youth are more likely to advocate for. Thank you for your question, Laika. And yeah, can our panelists please answer that question?
Yeah, that's a tough one, eh? It's tough because, again, a lot of workplace dynamics are centered around the management and maintenance of power. And when you don't, when you have, and this is a big problem that we have not only in the workplace, and I'm going to keep reiterating that we see the links between workplace dynamics and social dynamics, right? Because these are issues that we also have in society between youth and sort of older people. This idea that I suffered to get to where I am, and therefore now I have to put you through that same thing for you to earn your place here. And we have a terrible, terrible attachment to this idea of suffering as virtue. And that is how you justify your human value, by how much you've suffered. And that, of course, also has its links in religion, and those values of suffering being the way to paradise. And however, even with that, I will say this: there will be a majority of older people who would be unwilling, because they cannot divorce themselves from the idea that it could be made easier for another generation, and that they then have missed out on that ease and grace. But there will be, in every generation, there will be a few who don't subscribe to that. And again, this is the importance of creating community, because you'll find those people. Have these conversations, with colleagues. Again, you don't have to become friends, but suss your colleagues out in order to understand them beyond being co-workers and employees of this organization, in order to identify potential allies. And I have heard stories of people who, besides being managerial and sort of senior in their organization, also make it almost an unofficial part of their role to make sure that young people are ushered in to opportunities and sort of advanced in the workplace, because they understand that at some point those people are going to be them, because they're not going to stay at that organization forever. So yeah, there are in cases whereby there doesn't seem to be such individuals in a workplace. A lot of young people then also, like, you do activism in the workplace as a collective of young people. You advocate for and bring the thing up in the I don't know, what do you call these things, the Monday morning meeting, and communicate amongst your colleagues. Eventually, I hope, with enough resistance from enough people, because again, nothing can be achieved as an individual. The workplaces must concede. They cannot possibly replace the entire complement of staff. They cannot possibly threaten a whole collective of staff members with dismissal because they don't like what they are saying. I think we underestimate just how valuable we are as employees in any situation to the company, because we are fed this idea that this is a favor that's being done to us. But that is not the case. It simply isn't. And I think coming to terms with and really, really embodying the knowledge that you are not sort of a charity case to this organization is something that will cultivate this culture of resistance and advancement of issues.
I completely agree with you and everything that you've said, Jamil. From my part, what I'd like to add is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie says that the problem with a single story is not that it is untrue, but that it is incomplete. It makes one story the only story. And that's basically the story of stereotypes. So I think both the younger generation and the older generation have stereotypes of each other. And it's just a generalized idea that the older generation does not like the youth because they are just wild, they really don't care, they're carefree, and the younger generation is saying that the older generation is outdated, they're not keeping up to the changing technologies. And so there is this disparity that exists. But the only way that we can break these stereotypes is by having conversations. There's a lot of time where I've spoken with older people, and they really just don't understand the youth. And what you don't understand is what you fear. Literally, fear is built out of not understanding, the fear of the unknown. And so this idea that this generation of people who didn't struggle are going to come in and take over our jobs, and we have all these years of experience, and that's problematic in itself. But we can both, there's enough space for all of us. So at the end of the day, I always have this conversation with older people, and I say that we're not trying to replace anyone. There's no concept of replacing. We need experience for this world to function. The world cannot function without experience. Yes, we have new ideas. Yes, we are receptive to change, but we need experience as a foundation. So there's enough space for all of us in these organizations. We just need to work together. Organizations that are representative of all different ages are, I'm 100% sure, are more functional than anything else, because you've really got this experiential foundation, and you've got this change receptive youth who can take on COVID-19 and implement change, but you've got this foundation of people. Oh, sorry. I had a phone call. I'm back. And then you've got this foundation of people who can, still keep those systems who are working in place, because sometimes you don't need change. Sometimes when something is working, it's just better to keep it as it is. So my answer to that would be, when you find yourself in these spaces where there is a disparity, where there is this conflict that is going on between the different ages, have a conversation, and you'll realize that more often than not, you both have the same goals, you have the same vision, and you have the same things that you are trying to achieve in your organization or whatever it may be. You just have different ways of going about it. And as human beings, we are different. There's 7 billion of us with 7 billion different personalities. So it's whether old, young, short, tall, white, black, there's just so many different changes and differences that we have, and we're going to have to accept those differences and move forward if we have the same goal.
Yeah, no, I think what I even wanted to say is gone. Yeah, it's hot here. Eh? But I think another thing that we should also consider, right, and I think also the older generation needs to agree with us on, is that we really do need new ideas, right? We need the youth, we need young voices, we need young Black women in power. I mean, because it's not a matter of we're coming to take over their work, their hard work. We're just here to take over from their struggles and whatnot. I just think sometimes you must just let go, guys. We see you, we recognize you, we thank you, but sometimes you just need to let go so that change can happen. And change cannot happen with the ideas of the old things. We need new things for new challenges, right? And so I think another issue that was raised was an issue of trust, right? We need to trust each other. The older generation needs to trust us to bring upon change, of course. And we can work together. We're not saying that they should leave, or we're saying that they're not as important as they used to be, but they should just allow us be in the forefront. They should give us space, they should give us a chance and a voice to speak, right, to voice out our own opinions and bring upon whatever I think solutions we think could work to whatever problems. Because I'd like to believe that for example, an issue of gender-based violence and sexual harassment has always been a thing, right? But they never really spoke about it because of maybe whatever norm there was back then. But now that young people are coming out, we're speaking about it, and here we are, coming up with solutions to the problem. So I think, some things just need to just happen. Sometimes you must not fight, just let it go. It's your turn, it's fine, it's finished. And also I'd like to just assure them that the future is in safe feminist hands. I mean, the young people know what they're doing, and they're definitely not going to let them down. They should just trust us to, do the parts for everybody. So yes.
Thank you so much for the panelists' input. We just had to excuse Elma. She had to leave because she has other commitments, but we thank her for her contribution. And on the points that were made, I think, the making of life easier, making life easier is a telltale of the times changing and adapting. If there's no need for the younger, generation, to suffer in the new workplace that they've entered just because you did. We can't now start going backwards. There's a new age, even with technology. Technology has become so much easier because of adapting and change. And workplaces need to adapt and change and trust young people. And when we enter, I think it's a thing of not replacing you, but more transferring of information, you know. Because at some point you're not going to be able to sit down and do the work that you were able to do 20 odd years ago. And that's, I guess, where we come in to make life easier for ourselves with new systems and new methods to do the work that you struggled with doing, you know, years ago. But yes, I see that my co-host has her hand up.
Okay, thank you. Before I ask my question, we have another question in the chat box from Lucy, and it reads, young people can do well with choosing organizations to work for, being deliberate and unapologetic. However, what is the choice when opportunities are so scarce? And as a young person, you are as a young person who graduated into being a breadwinner. Okay, so I think that is, we've lost one of our speakers. So could we have either Jamil or Oamogetswe, sorry, to answer that question, and then I'll ask my question. We'll just wrap up after that.
I think Jamil can answer that one.
Yeah, interesting question. And I actually also just thought about this in relation to the conversation that was, or the comments that were made about older people feeling like they are losing relevance or importance in the workplace. And that has often got to do also with the fact that these are people who are socialized into becoming the pinnacle of one entity. So you work your way into becoming the most important person in that organization. Now we have younger people who are doing multiple things, you know, and not in the sense of well, sometimes it is, but for others, it's a case of using all these skills to the fullest potential. So I work at, I don't know, PwC as a auditor, but I also have interests in fashion design, and I get influencer gigs for orange juice sometimes. So I do all these different things that give me the opportunity to earn, first of all, earn more money than I would working one job, but also explore different interests and give expression to different interests. What I think, however, needs to happen is that a lot of companies have this thing of, and the clauses, I understand in some industries why it exists, but ways need to be found around this. So there's this clause in a contract usually that basically comes down to, you can't work any other job while you work for us. You can't earn other money. You can't do anything outside of this job. And that is very, very stifling, especially in the economic climate that we exist in. And of course, we have the issues we have because the job market and the economic sort of the labor system was always based on only allowing a few in, right? So that only these amounts of opportunities are created so that people have to fight amongst each other to get to survive, basically. But what really needs to happen is that, especially newer, younger organizations that are started by younger people, this idea that you are shackled to this organization while you work for them needs to be done away with. We need to understand that, in relation to the point that I made earlier, in order to recognize people as full human beings when they walk into the workplace, part of that is also understanding that they have multiple skills and talents that cannot all be serviced by this organization that you run. And so to give people the opportunity to go out and practice their skills for remuneration elsewhere, which number one is probably going to benefit you because this person is sort of fulfilled and sort of you know, getting what they want out of their world of work. So when somebody is fulfilled, they are happier in doing the work that they do. And so that happiness is going to spill over into the quality of the work that they produce. It's not necessarily that, you know, they're going to be doing all these other things and then they're going to sort of slack on your work, or then they're going to leave. The other thing is also people leave. So let them, you know, this idea that people need to be, yes, of course, staff retention is a thing, and that's got to do with the company culture that you create. But at the same time, like inflow and outflow of people needs to become a bit more of a flexible process, and understanding that catering to diverse needs and interests in people is something that can ultimately only better your organization. But from the perspective that the question was asked, multiple streams of income, I know it's not always easy, especially in the climate that we have, but I think that's why we have these conversations, and that's why we create these spaces, so that we can find each other and find ways to create those multiple streams of income that allow for us to not only earn better, but also express ourselves in different ways that speak to our different skills and talents.
Thank you for that, Jamil. So the question I wanted to ask you was, beyond policy reform, what can be done to create enabling workspaces for LGBT plus people in the world of work? So not just in, you know, a 9-to-5 type of job, but in the world of work.
Look, I think this is a question that is also linked to what needs to be done in the world, right? Because here's the thing. You, for example, you might be somebody who is, you are not affirming of queer people. In fact, you are quite homophobic, and that's how you operate in the world, and you get rewarded for that. But now when you at work, you need to abide by certain, you know, sort of rules, and you need to smile, you need to be friendly and all these things. However, the way that you engage with queer people in your workplace ultimately is informed by your view of the world, right? So you know that you can't, for example, outrightly deny somebody something at work, or ill-treat them physically, or verbally abuse them, whatever. But you then find ways to use company policies to hold them back, right? And in many ways, it's the same thing with all different forms of discrimination, with racism, with classism, with ableism. A lot of times people will always be like, yeah, but show me the proof. How are they being homophobic? How are they being racist? But you know what's going on here. You can see, you can tell. But people find very subtle ways to use the rules to manipulate it towards their own ends, right? So what needs to happen is we need to, and this is not representation in the sense of, okay, we have a black person, we have a gay person, we have a disabled person, and so now we've ticked all the boxes and we have our accreditation. This is about putting diverse people of diverse positionalities, and when I say diverse, I'm not talking about just people who you can identify, who you can say these are all the people on our payroll. This is putting people who have different life experiences, different positionalities, come from different backgrounds, in substantial positions whereby they can, not from the perspective of, oh, this is what I need to do because my job requires it of me. From the perspective of, I understand what it's like to move through the world as a queer person, as a black person. And so therefore, I am going to use the institutional power that I have to make sure that our policies, our company culture, our just general, sort of language that we use in the environment is affirming of all people, And it comes down to it comes down to making sure that you have the right people in the decision-making room. And that is something that has to be deliberate. You have to be absolutely deliberate about it. And people will say, like they do with BEE, this is just sort of window dressing, you know. And in some cases it is. In some cases, companies do appoint people who fit a particular profile just so they can say, we did it, so shush, leave us alone. But we're not talking about that now. We're talking about making sure that people who are marginalized also get represented in positions of power in organization. So, I mean, that really is it for me. And of course, the point is also putting people in those positions because they would best be placed to recognize the little things that make people feel unwelcome in that workplace. So like I say, changing company culture around using certain types of language. When you address a room, don't say, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Those are not the only kinds of people who exist in that room. You know, changing the languaging around working hard and playing hard and breaking things and knocking things down. Those are only things that can come about when you allow the people who are affected by those things to actually effect the changes that are needed.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for that. I'd like to see we've run out of time. We were supposed to play another video of Riska answering the question about what is the transformational potential for young people in the world of work, but we're out of time. The video is on our YouTube page, so it would be very nice or cool if you guys could just go and watch it after this session. We'd like to thank all our panelists for joining us this evening and for really dropping some precious gems. I believe I speak on behalf of everyone when I say we've learned something, we've parted with new information, which is going to aid us in going out into the world. As Womaniko Associates, we do offer consulting and coaching services. And to find out more about those offers, you can either email me at jabwedumaniko.com, or you could email Score. If I'm not mistaken, her email address is Score. There it is on the screen. Score focuses, her company, the Wild Health company, focuses more on the workplace wellness. So please, if you want to find out more about workplace wellness, about coaching, you guys can send us an email. And then we would also I'd also like to make mention of the Dare2SeeUs group that we have, which is on Facebook. It is a private group on Facebook, and it's a platform that's created so that we can take these conversations and continue them onto the group. As I did say before, it is a private group, and it would be very nice if you could join that group on Facebook.
Yes, thank you, Jabu. What we also have as Womaniko Associates is the online book club, which we have once every 2 weeks, where we will be reading a book. Sorry, I don't have it here with me. We'll be reading a book called There Is More to Us, which is the Womaniko book. I'm sure you can see up at the top. But we'll also be reading stories from other books or other stories of other people who are sharing their experiences of, not being able to be authentic or being able to be authentic, but so many other different stories as well. And if you do have a story to share, then you're more than welcome to email us your story where we can read it for you, or you yourself can read it to the people on our Instagram. And speaking of social media, these are our social media platforms. We are on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. We are Womaniko at Instagram and Facebook, Womaniko Transforming Spaces on LinkedIn, and Womaniko_spaces on Twitter. And and if you would like to find out more about our speakers, they are tagged in our posts on the social medias, on Instagram, on Facebook, mostly Instagram, but yes, you will find them there. We'd like to thank everyone for coming and joining us at this event. This was truly very informative, emotional. It was just everything, we got experiences from all the panelists. We got solutions, implementable solutions. And we got to hear different viewpoints from everyone. And that's where I will leave you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you on the people on Facebook who are joining us there as well. And thank you to my co-host, Jabu. Yay! Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good evening, everyone. Bye.
Bye.